Thank you all for bearing with me. We have one more screen share here. Okay, let's see. Okay. All right, can everybody see that? Wonderful. Well, thank you all so much for being here today, and thank you for your patience as we get the Zoom rooms all set up and ready to go. So I'd like to welcome you all. My name is Melanie Stolp, and I am a Water Programs Manager at Resource Central. I'm very excited to be with you all tonight for a very awesome webinar series, Conserving Water in the Garden with Rain Barrels by Jessica Thrasher. Before we get started, I'd like to tell you a little bit about Resource Central. Resource Central is a local nonprofit that has been around since 1976. And we offer a wide range of conservation programs in three main areas: waste diversion at our reuse facility in Boulder, energy conservation through our Renew Our Schools program, and water conservation through low water landscape programs, such as garden in a box or lawn replacement, as well as sprinkler efficiency evaluations with Slow the Flow. We do this as an organization by partnering with local water providers, such as Loveland Water and Power, who is sponsoring tonight's webinar as part of our Waterwise Yard seminar series. This year, Loveland Water and Power is also offering Slow the Flow and Garden in a Box. Our programs are very, very popular, so we definitely suggest checking first to see if spots are available. And if we are full, we have plenty of signups for newsletters and alert lists to let you know when more spots do become available. So if you have any other questions about our programs, or as what programs are offered as a Loveland Water and Power resident or any other city, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. So before we get started, I would like to go over some logistics for the webinar in terms of answering questions and the format of the presentation. This webinar is recorded and can be referenced in the future. And if the presenter has handouts to send out afterwards, we'll make sure to get those to you. In the meantime, if you have any questions throughout the presentation or need something repeated, you can use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, which will appear when you hover over it, to ask questions. We have about 121 attendees tonight, which is very awesome. So I'll definitely do my best to answer the questions asked. We've worked in a few different breaks throughout the presentation that I will pose, where I will pose questions that have come up that pertain to the group to Jessica. I definitely appreciate your understanding as I worked through answering the questions as best I can and conveying them to Jessica as they come up. If your question is unanswered, however, at the end of the webinar, please email us and I will put the email in the chat as well. But the email address is turfremoval@resourcecentral.org, and we will definitely get back to you within the week. Finally, if you like this webinar and others in our series, we'd love to hear about it on a Google review. And also be sure to sign up for more webinars on our website. Upcoming topics include veggie gardens, new to Colorado landscaping, which is also a bilingual webinar offered in April, and much more. You will also be getting a survey after this webinar, so be sure to fill that out for a chance to win a $250 Visa gift card and then review on Google. So before I pass it over to the presenter, I'm just going to cover a few important a little bit of information about tonight's webinar. So the title is Conserving Water in the Garden with Rain Barrels, and it is with Jessica Thrasher. As I mentioned previously, this webinar tonight is brought to you by Loveland Water and Power. And as a resident of Loveland Water and Power, there's quite a few things that you can be a part of, such as indoor-outdoor rebates, different water saving tips, and additional efficiency programs. So definitely check out these websites here at the bottom. You can check out your own usage by logging into myaccount.lovegov.org. And you can get home energy reports at lovelandwaterandpower.org/HUR. Loveland and Power also has some demonstration gardens. So come springtime, we definitely encourage you to check those out. There's the Northern Water Conservation Gardens in Berthoud, Colorado, and the Loveland Xeriscape Demonstration Garden in Loveland, Colorado. So before we get started, I am going to take a quick poll here on behalf of Loveland. So I'm going to launch this poll now. They're interested in learning a little bit about what water saving resources you find the most useful. So if you have a minute, go ahead and answer that poll for us. We'll just get the results. Give you all just a moment to read that.
Can I share my screen while the poll is going?
Absolutely, go for it. And Diego, I'm not sure if the closed captioning is working, but I will also take a look at that. I'm finished. All right. Awesome. Some results are coming in. Give you just a little bit more time there. Great. Wonderful. Okay, I'm going to end.
Mel, can you see my correct screen?
I can, yep.
Presenter view?
Yes, you have it. Not that I can see just the slide. You're good to go. Yeah, I know how that can go. All right. Well, it is without any more hesitation, I'm very excited to turn it over to Jessica Thrasher, who will be giving the webinar tonight. And once again, if you have any questions throughout, please go ahead and put them in the chat, and I will take them down, and we'll get to them during the breaks. All right, Jessica, thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here with you tonight to talk about rain barrels. Thank you all so much for your interest in this topic and learning more about how you can conserve in your garden. Here's a little bit more about me. Basically, I just love talking about rain barrels, rain gardens. I'm a part of the Colorado Stormwater Center, which I'm sure that not very many of you have heard of. But I just engaging with the community in this way. Stormwater is something that, how I describe it, it's really rainwater harvesting, harvesting water off of your own roof, but at a city scale. So the Colorado Stormwater Center, our mission is to advance stormwater management throughout Colorado by conducting practical research and providing education and training opportunities. We are in the Colorado State University and have 5 main things that we do. One is trainings, where we do offer certifications. One is the stormwater control measure certification. Then we also do design review. So we have a number of certifications that we do. We also do presentations like this one in the community. We provide, or we conduct stormwater research, and then we provide a lot of different resources. This year, we received a grant from the Colorado Water Conservation Board to translate our content into Spanish. So we are big proponents of language justice, very happy to partner with Resource Central to offer this presentation bilingually as well. And more resources will be coming on our website that will be available in Spanish soon. We also have a symposium every year. Our 2022 symposium will be in September during National Stormwater Awareness Week at the end of September. And then at the end of this presentation, like Mel mentioned, you will be receiving all of these slides, so you don't need to write furiously. You will be receiving all of them afterwards. And all of the blue lettering are links, so that when you receive this after, you can just click on that and go directly to that link. Also, we would love for you to join our newsletter, where you can be notified of all of our upcoming trainings, our free presentations, our upcoming research and events. And of course, when the symposium registration is available, you will be able to register for that as well. So here is the outline of what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to talk about, why are we having this conversation around the need to conserve water? What is rainwater harvesting? More information about Colorado rain barrel regulations, the type of rain barrel system that I recommend you install, the materials you need, the step-by-step for how to install your rain barrel, and finally, additional information on winterizing, maintenance, and frequently asked questions. In addition to this presentation at the end, we just created how to install your rain barrel guide. And so I will also be sending that out, or Resource Central will be sending that out with this presentation materials as well. We hope that you find this helpful. Right now, it's only available in English, but we are in the process of getting this translated. And once it's translated, it will be sent out as well. Okay, so where is the water? Why are we having this conversation tonight? The reality is, in Colorado and across the West, we're having decreased water availability. And this is happening for a variety of reasons. One is a lot of people like myself moved to Colorado from other states, loved it and stayed. And so the increases that we're having in Colorado are substantial. With the increases in population, we're having more pressure on our water system. And we're having decreased water availability due to climate change, which we have seen really substantially here in Colorado over the last few years, with drought, with fires, with just the increases in temperatures that we're seeing in our summers. So that is, that's all impacting our snowpack and the amount of water that we have when the snow melts off in the springtime. In addition to these factors, we're also having increasing priorities for water. What does that mean? So very briefly, with Colorado water law is conducted with something called the doctrine of prior appropriations. That means the first people to come and use water beneficially received a water right. And so the way that you can kind of think about this is, if people are standing in a line from 1 to 100, the people with the senior water right standing at 1, the most junior water right standing at 100. In times of plenty, when we have plenty of water, everyone gets their allocation. And you might think that in times of drought, that everyone would receive a little bit less so that you would all still get water. But that's not the way that it works. The way that it works is that the number one person in line with the most senior water right gets their full allocation, and then it moves to the second person and they get their full allocation, and so on and so forth until the water is completely used up. So the people with the junior water rights in times of drought don't receive any water. And you can see how that would be very stressful to have a junior water right when you really need that water. In addition to this, kind of the priorities for water on the river are, what kind of uses do we have for the water? The number one use is agriculture. Those are the most senior water rights. That is how water was used beneficially from the very beginning, agriculture. In addition to agriculture, we also have industrial uses, municipal uses, or water providers, where we get our drinking water. We have recreational uses, how much water has to be in the river so that you can recreate. And then we also have uses for how much water needs to be, environmental uses, and how much water needs to be in the river for the fish and for the habitat. So these all are not necessarily competing priorities, but priorities where a lot of conversations need to happen to make sure that the needs of all of these different areas are met. As I mentioned, climate change is really impacting the amount of water we have. And finally, the high water use. 50% of the water that we use in Colorado in the summertime is used on outdoor irrigation. 50%. So we're talking about 80 to 100 gallons going to our outdoor landscapes. And when we're talking about outdoor landscapes, a lot of the time we're talking about lawn water use, because that is the biggest use of water in our landscapes. So to put this in perspective, because with water, it's really hard to tell how much you're using. So I wanted to put this in perspective for everyone. If we were to look at 100 square feet, which is not very much, it's the size of a SUV. If we have 100 square feet of lawn, then that uses 124 to 186 gallons per week. Now that might not sound like that much water. It's not that much. So then I wanted to look at, what does that look like in Boulder? So in the city of Boulder, there's approximately 45,000 homes, and we can all probably agree that each of those homes has an SUV size lawn. And we all know there's probably a lot more lawn than that. For those 45,000 homes, if you use 185 gallons per week, that's over 8 million gallons being used on lawns per week in Boulder. So that's just to put it in perspective of a number that doesn't sound very substantial. When all of us use that much water at the same time, it adds up quickly. Additionally, indoors, as you can see here, 50% outdoor use, but in the home, the toilet is the biggest user of water. With shower and bath next, I actually combine these. It's 11% for shower, 1% for bath. And so you can see how the water is being used in the home. That's why there's a lot of different rebates for water efficient fixtures in the home. One of the things that you might be surprised to see, or that I'd like to just point out, is the leaks. 5% for leaks. It's a lot of water. One of the things that a story I like to share about this is I live on a little bit of property and we had goats for a little while, got talked into it. And one of the goats turned on a spigot in our field with its horn. Didn't know that was possible. And it was a full day before we knew that the goat had turned on this spigot. There was so much water used that our water provider came out and checked to see if our meter was broken. So that was a case of a huge leak that we did not know anything about. Now that is no longer an issue because we have upgraded to, it's called the Eye on Water. This is in Fort Collins area, but it is a smart meter that you can attach to your phone and it'll notify you the moment you have a leak so that you can get on with fixing that leak as quickly as possible. So if you don't have that yet, I would highly recommend that you talk to your water provider to see if that's an option for you to set that up. So now that we know there's a problem, what can we do about it? One of the things that you can do is purchase WaterSense products. This blue lettering is a link that you can check out. WaterSense products are certified through a third party to ensure water efficiency standards. And there's a very large range of products from toilets to faucets to irrigation controllers. Here on the left, you'll see this graphic here of water being wasted. And I really love this image because when we're outside and our hose is just running, like I said before, it's so difficult to know how much water we're using. And it's just something that it's kind of that hidden waste of water. Many municipalities offer water conservation resources. I know that many of you are potentially from other areas around Colorado, not necessarily Loveland or Boulder. So if you are not with in the Loveland area, be sure to check with your specific water provider to see what benefits you have. This can include free outdoor irrigation audits, equipment rebates, lawn removal services, grants for removing turf and installing xeric landscaping. There's a lot of indoor water conservation resources, rebates. And so just be sure, if you're going ahead and making these changes in your home, make sure that you can get the rebates that you qualify for if you're already doing those things. Okay, so now I'd like to talk about redefining the rain. The image on the left is from a book, Rainwater Harvesting for the Drylands and Beyond by Brad Lancaster. If you are interested to learn more after hearing this talk, I highly recommend his book series. He has 3 of them. And so please check that out if you're interested in learning more. So on the left, what we have here is a picture of a traditional house. You can still see homes being built like this in neighborhoods, wherever you are. You just drive around and you typically see that the home is built on a high part of the lot and then the yard will slope down towards the street. So this was done for a good reason. You don't want water pooling around the home that can seep into your basement or affect your foundation. But when our homes are built in this way, water moves quickly across a sloped surface. Additionally, our soils have a lot of clay in them. And so it takes a while for water to infiltrate or absorb into our soil. So when we have our homes built like this and we have our quick, flashy storms that are just hard, quick rains, we're not like Seattle. We don't have those day-long rain events with a slow trickle. That means that the water leaves our site very quickly. So the way that this kind of model, what it does to the way that we look at rainwater is really as a nuisance. How do we move water away from our home as quickly as possible? And if you're a gardener, which I'm sure many of you are, I myself am a gardener. If you have plants, that you're growing in your food gardens, and we have one of our hailstorms, and it's like, oh no, we need to get home and cover up our garden so it doesn't get destroyed. So you might be viewing rain as a nuisance, an annoyance, or some fear around the rain as well. So the other way that we can look at our rain, let's redefine the rain. And on the image on the left is looking at utilizing rainwater harvesting principles. And with rainwater harvesting, we want to slow down our water and spread it out so that it can infiltrate into our soils. And one of the additional ways we do that is through rainwater capture in rain barrels. And in this system, we can look at the rain as a resource. We can be a happy corgi. Look at how happy that corgi is, the rain. And see our rain as a resource, as fun, as abundance. I have two little boys, and they're 6 and 3. And of course, I've been talking to them about rainwater harvesting for their entire lives. And so whenever it rains, they both are like, Mama, it's raining for your plants. And they're super excited. And so I wish that for all of you. Rainwater harvesting is the collecting, storing, and putting rainwater runoff to use at your home. It is easy to collect using your existing gutter system. I really like this image of this house because it shows on the front of the home how all of the gutters go to one spot. All of the downspouts are connected to one location. And you can bet that at this house, they're having issues right there. There's probably standing water. They're having just a lot of water being directed to this one corner of the house. And I say right here that it's perfect for a rain garden, which it is, but it's also perfect for rain barrels. Why should we do rainwater harvesting? It's free. It reduces the demand for treated municipal or drinking water. It helps you save money on your water bills. Water rates will be increasing like we have seen with everything else, and plants love it. Additionally, just kind of a short story about this. In Arizona, people in Arizona use water from the Colorado River, where we get most of our water from. And by the time that the river reaches Arizona, it has been used and reused multiple times. And every time that it's used, salt is added to that water. Salt is very difficult to remove. And so in Arizona, when they do their irrigation with the Colorado River water, a lot of their plants have salt rings around them. It's white around their plants. So one of the best ways to help their plants, because plants do not thrive in that kind of environment, is to flush it with rainwater. Rainwater does not have salts in it. So another benefit of rainwater. So one of the questions I get a lot, they'll say to me, Jessica, it sounds like a great idea to do rainwater harvesting, but we don't even get that much water in Colorado. We don't get that much rain. So I always like to talk about how much rain we get in Colorado. Now it varies a lot from city to city. In Boulder, y'all get 20.68 inches per year. In Fort Collins, we get 16, so I'm jealous. And that might not seem like that much rain, but 1 inch of rain on a 1,000 square foot roof is 623 gallons of water. And a 1,000 square foot roof is actually just a section of roof. So once you're looking at your entire roof line, you're able to collect a substantially more than 623 gallons. And if you're looking at this annually, that would be over 12,000 gallons a year being able to be collected from this 1,000 square foot section of roof. So that is plenty of water for rain barrels and rain gardens and rainwater harvesting. You can use water from your rain barrel for a variety of things. You can use it in your food production gardens, for your annual potted plants, your greenhouse plants, or to establish native plants and rain gardens. I get a question a lot about food production gardens and if it's safe to use rainwater on food production gardens, and I'll be answering that question later. I've been mentioning these two different types of rainwater harvesting systems, one being rain gardens and passive systems. Rain gardens use gravity to direct and slow the flow of water, and this allows for greater infiltration. Passive systems can collect a substantially more than active systems. Even in, and I'll be talking about this in a moment, but in Colorado, we're restricted on the amount of water that we can collect, and we're the only state that has that kind of restriction. But in other areas where they can even collect 2,000, 5,000 gallons of water in a cistern, passive systems are still able to collect more water than active systems. Active systems are collecting and storing water for future use. An example of this would be rain barrels. So very briefly, rain gardens are most simply gardens watered by the rain. You have a couple of different components to a rain garden. One is the basin, and it's basically the bowl or a hole that you dig out, a depression that allows the water to pool and slow down so that it has the ability to infiltrate. You're not creating a pond. You're not putting any kind of liner at the bottom of that. You're just slowing the water down. And then a berm is what goes on the downhill side of your basin, and it's just a buildup of soil that will allow the water to stay in there until it has time to infiltrate. Next, you have native plants, which are adapted to our climate and are used to the periods of rain and the periods of dryness. And so they are suited for a rain garden, and once they're fully established after 3 years, they do not need any additional water unless it is a severe drought. And finally, mulch acts as a super absorbent sponge. It also helps to prevent weeds and to really make sure that your rain garden has access to that water for longer. When you're looking at using water as a resource, look at your drainage issues. So this is a picture of my driveway, and this was before I did any landscape modification. This is not where I wanted my water to go at all. I wanted my water to be uphill of that in gardens. So it's watering gardens instead of sitting and blocking my driveway. So when you're looking at, okay, I have this problem with water sitting right here, how could you use this resource in a different way? So what opportunities are there from this area where you really want water to be moved away from? Here are some pictures. I know that not a lot of you potentially have seen a rain garden. So briefly, on the top left is a picture I had weed fabric and then rock and then 7 rose bushes. And it's a little bit hard to see from this photo, but they were not doing well. They had grass growing all up in them, and it was just not an attractive part of our landscape, and they were requiring a lot of water. So I decided to remove all of the rose bushes and the rock and the weed barrier and utilize another issue that I was having. So up in the upper left-hand picture, there's also my chicken coop, and my chicken coop didn't have a gutter on it, and so water was just flowing into my chicken coop whenever it rained. And it was creating this, this environment for the chickens where it was damp and it just wasn't very sanitary for them. So that was an issue. That was a problem that I wanted to fix. So we put a downspout, a gutter and a downspout on the chicken coop and directed all of that rain into a rain garden. So here on May 17th, that was the planting day. And then you can see it planted on the top right. Now, some of you might be thinking, whoa, that's a lot of mulch. And don't worry, it all grows up together beautifully. And you can see even from June 26th here that they're starting to grow in together. And I didn't have this picture here, but I have another photo of even September of that same year where they are fully blooming and thriving, and there you don't see that much mulch. Here are 2 of my favorite flowers that are native plants, the chocolate flower, which actually smells like chocolate, and then harebells there as well, because I love sharing native plants. So I'll pause here for questions.
Right, awesome. Well, that was a very fascinating statistic you pulled up about how much 1,000 square feet of roof can pull. Wow. Awesome. Well, we have a few questions here. Let's see. For starters, what is the preferred type of mulch to use within a rain garden?
So there's a couple of different ways that you could do this. Shredded mulch is really the best because it clumps together and kind of holds better, because when that rain garden fills up with water and then it overflows, you might lose some of your mulch if it's just floating. So chipped mulch is lighter and has a tendency to kind of leave your rain garden with the water. But chip mulch is also available for free in a lot of municipalities. So even though shredded mulch will stay better in your rain garden, I say if you have the access to free mulch, by all means use it. And if you see that it's an issue in your rain garden, or if you're really frustrated with having to always kind of rake that mulch back up into your rain garden, then I would say switch to shredded mulch.
Awesome. And kind of a follow-up to that, what type of soil is best to fill the rain garden?
So we want to use, native plants need native soils. And we're working actually right now on a guide for how to do soil amendments in rain gardens. So more to come on that, but it's very site specific. It depends on the type of soil that you have. You want to use the soil that you have that's there in your garden and amend it slightly. What you definitely don't want to do is remove all of the soil that you dug for that depression and then put just like potting soil in there. We just want to use our native soils and just amend them slightly so that there will be better infiltration in those areas. What's amazing about rain gardens is that as your plants grow up, your infiltration rate will increase, because as the plants have their roots that get bigger and bigger and more established, they break up that clay soil and the infiltration rate goes up.
Awesome. All right, got one more here. You mentioned a little bit about the indoor use. So is there any recommendation about recycling home indoor gray water for lawn and garden use? Or what are your thoughts on that?
Oh man, how much time do we have?
Yeah, it's a big one.
So, okay, I'm trying to figure out how to shorten this. There are more regulations coming for using gray water. Gray water comes from your laundry, your sink in your bathroom, your shower. And there are some ways that you can use gray water now, some technologies. It's called Greater Water Systems, Greyter water systems. And they have this unit that looks like a small washer dryer combo unit, if you've seen one of those. And what it does is it's for 2-story homes, and it pulls in all of the gray water from your house, cleans it, and puts it in your toilet so that you're not using drinking water in your toilet. So it's amazing and I love it. And there's a study going on right now. It's a partnership with Denver Water and Greater Water Systems. It's about 40 homes that they're doing right now to test it. It's a pilot system, so that hopefully as we move forward in development, it'll just be a standard feature and new development. That's the hope. With gray water, utilizing gray water is legal in Colorado, but it has to be approved by each city and county that you're in. So I have recently, like last week, been in a conversation about new gray water regulations that are coming. And I heard some really, really great news about more and more areas in Colorado that will be adopting or will be approving gray water use in their areas. And as that comes about, there'll be more education on how you can integrate that into your homes. So I'm very excited. Stay tuned for more information on that.
Awesome. That's super interesting. Well, thank you. And everyone, just keep your questions coming. I'll try to do our best to get to them during the next break as well. And I did want to let you know, Jessica, the closed captioning will be coming on now. I just didn't want to throw you off in the middle.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Well, we can keep on moving. And thank you all for your questions. And I said, if we don't get to them now, I'll do my best.
Okay. And if the closed captionings come on and I can see myself talking, I will have to pause because that will be distracting.
If you want me to leave it off too, that's no problem.
Oh, no, keep going.
Okay.
If I see it, I'll take care of it. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so as I was mentioning, there are Colorado rain barrel regulations. In 2016, rainwater harvesting was legalized for the very first time in Colorado. That was a very exciting day. With this legalization, there are some regulations, and those are, you can have a maximum of 2 rain barrels with a combined storage of 110 gallons or less. So because of this 110 gallon limit, we recommend the use of 55-gallon rain barrels. That way you can get 2 and you can maximize the amount of water you can collect. It can only be used for outdoor purposes, watering your lawn, your plants, or your garden. The container has to have a sealable lid. This is to prevent mosquito breeding. We don't want to have just giant pots of water sitting next to our house that can cause an issue with mosquitoes. So we need to have that sealable lid on there. Never drink or cook with water from a rain barrel. It is untreated and could cause harm to you or your pets if you drink it. So I had been in a conversation with someone about, they had asked me if they could use it to water their chickens. And so I told them that no, you cannot, because this water is not treated and it could make their chickens sick. So even if it is chickens, livestock, you don't want to use rainwater for that reason unless you are treating it in some way. A couple of different considerations. There are tons of sizes of rain barrels. There's 40 gallons all the way up to 100 gallons. And so there's really not a standard size of rain barrels. So that's why we really say, 55 gallons is the best, just because of our restriction that we have on the total number of gallons. So this means that if you have 3 40-gallon rain barrels, you can't use them because you can only have a maximum of 2. So just keep that in mind. If you have a homeowners association, be sure to check with them before you purchase your rain barrel. Now, homeowners associations cannot prevent you from getting a rain barrel. That was written into the legislation. So they might think they can though. So that might be something that you bring to their attention, show them that regulation in case you're getting pushback on having a rain barrel. Now, what they can do is they can have aesthetic requirements, what it looks like, or location requirements. They might say it has to be behind a fence. Maybe it has to be in your backyard. Maybe it has to be the same color as your house. Those could be things that you run into. So before you go out, I know you're all going to be really excited after this webinar to go pick the perfect spot for your rain barrel. But before you do, check with them if you have an HOA. Additionally, winterization is needed, just like your sprinkler system. So keep note of that you do need to maintain these barrels to keep them working. And spigot placement. A spigot is where the water comes out of your barrel. In this picture on the left, it's with the red handle. And then an overflow planning. Overflow is when your rain barrel fills up and then it rains again. Where does that water go? Some rain barrels have overflow ports, and you need to make sure that your overflow port is not being directed next to your house. So it's really just planning on where are you putting your spigot, because you need to be able to access the water in your rain barrel, and where is that overflow going, because you don't want to create an issue of that sitting against your house. Here are a couple of types of rain barrels that I have seen that I wanted to tell you the pros and cons of, and really just caution you against some of these types. So the first one on the left here, I have seen this barrel a lot. It's very pretty. It looks nice. It's like a terracotta type of barrel, and it has a planter on the top. So the top arrow there is a little bit high, but it's pointing to the depression in the top. So that is to put a plant on the top of your rain barrel. A couple of things with this. One is that it has this small depression, so that if you're not using that for a plant, that little depression is going to be capturing water and mosquitoes will definitely be in there. So I really don't want you to have a mosquito issue next to your house. So that's one of the things that I caution against for this barrel. Additionally, if you have a rain barrel like this with soil right where the water will be going into the barrel potentially, You could get a lot of soil in your barrel, then you have to clean it more often. Next is the spigot height on this barrel. The spigot is high. So just something to note is that the water that you will be able to get out of your barrel is above the spigot. So anything below the spigot will be more difficult to get out. You'll have to tilt your barrel to get that water out. So I advocate for a spigot as low as possible so that you can get the maximum use of your rain barrel. The next picture is of a rain barrel with a screen on the top. So this screen is allowing light to come into your barrel. When light interacts with water that is stationary and has nutrients in it, algae will form in your barrel, guaranteed. So I advise against this type of rain barrel because of you'll have to clean your barrel more often if you're getting algae in it. Additionally, the screen on this may or may not prevent mosquitoes getting in it. So if this is a type of barrel that you're looking at, make sure the holes are small enough to keep the mosquitoes out. In the next picture, we see another screen, another type of rain barrel with a screen, and this is definitely not small enough to keep mosquitoes out, so you're just going to have a big issue. The next rain barrel, this one I'm saying is illegal because you have to have a sealable lid. So some of you might be saying, Jessica, wait a minute. I could put that lid on top of that barrel and it's going to be sealed. That's true. But who is going to go out there before it rains, open up your rain barrel, run inside, run back outside when the rain stops, close it? No one. No one's going to do that. So this rain barrel is just going to be a hassle, so I don't recommend it. Next is the orange barrel. And this type of barrel has the downspout going directly in the top of the barrel. I'm sure some of you have seen this. So the issue here is that all of the debris, all of the leaves, everything that's on top of your house will go directly into your barrel. And it'll create this sediment at the bottom of your barrel. And then as the sediment builds up, that means you have less space for the water. So you're reducing the capacity of your rain barrel each time it rains because all of the stuff at the bottom is growing. A way to mitigate this would be to put some sort of filter at the top section, kind of around where that first black arrow is at the top. But if you don't have one of those, then you're just going to be setting yourself up to clean your barrel more often. Additionally, whenever you winterize your barrel, usually you remove your barrel and then what's going to happen? You're going to have this hanging downspout where water will be going directly to your foundation. So you would have to get a downspout extender to make sure that all of the water is being moved away from your foundation. So these are extra steps that would make your maintenance of your rain barrel just be more maintenance. The last one here is this rain barrel that I saw pretty recently, and it's in this cube formation. I mean, it's pretty cool. They're like the mats that you use for kids. Since I have kids, I've had these mats that you can interlock them together. You may be wondering how water stays in it. Great question. It has a giant bag inside of it, a giant plastic bag. So that's going to be extremely difficult to clean. Even though these are fun and you could put stuff on top of them, just don't do it. I'm going to save you all the trouble right now by just saying there are better rain barrels out there. Okay, so I talked a lot about what not to do. Let's talk about what type of system to install. And that is a rain barrel with a diverter. So the diverter will be going in this in a lot of detail, but the diverters are easy to clean out. They have a simple install. The overflow will go out your existing downspout. You don't have to cut off your downspout. You just drill a hole into your downspout, and they're very easy to winterize. Where to buy your barrel. So Colorado Raincatcher is a local to Fort Collins company. They do some work up and down the Front Range. So depending on where you are, you could check to see if they have availability in your area. But they did provide a coupon for this class. And I just want to say that it's 5 off, not 50. So if you're going to use this code, it's 5 off DIY. If you have any trouble with this code, please contact me and I will get in touch with them about it. Next is Blue Barrel. They're a nationwide company. I really love their tools section of their website. They have like so many cool rain barrel tools. I could just stay there all day. It's really neat. So if you're interested in working with them, they're another great company. In Longmont, Container Reclaimer is also great to work with. They only have barrels and they typically don't clean out their barrels. So these are being upcycled. And so I love recycling. I know that Resource Central does too, upcycling items, but just know that you might have to rinse them out, which is fine. It's just something that you need to know going in that you will have to clean these barrels. Other places that you could get them are your big box stores, of course. And I always like to tell this story about Facebook Marketplace and if people are still using Craigslist, which I'm not sure. So I had been organizing before COVID, of course, a workshop with doing a rain barrel workshop where you drill in your own spigot hole and that sort of a thing. And you get your rain barrel there. So I needed 50 rain barrels for this project. And someone on Facebook Marketplace had 50 rain barrels. So I asked them what was in it, and they told me that food grade soap had been inside these barrels. And I said, that's great. They're going to be extra clean. Perfect. So I go to pick them up, and on the side of all the barrels, it was not food grade soap. It was hydrochloric acid. So it's really important that your barrel is a food grade barrel and that you know what was in it if you're upcycling barrels. Because the common practice for dealing with chemicals is to wash them out 3 times. But even if they're washed out 3 times, those contaminants leach into the plastic. And then as your water, your rainwater is sitting in these barrels until you can use it on your plants, those chemicals will leach back into that water that you're then putting on potentially like your veggie garden. So very important to make sure that you know what was in those barrels. Here are the costs and supplies needed. I updated just now all of these prices. So unfortunately, I think as we have all seen that prices are going up on everything and they went up on rain barrels. So here is the cost of rain barrels currently. The DIY or do it yourself is the most economical way to do your rain barrel. And you can pay a ton of money for a rain barrel if you like, really fancy ones. But for the purposes of this class, I'm talking about the DIY barrels. With Colorado Rain Catcher, you can get them for $50. These are cleaned out. Or you can go to Container Reclaimer in Longmont. They're $30 if you buy them from there. You will need to have the rain barrel adapter parts, which are pictured at the bottom right here. And we'll be going over what all of those are, but you need to have this connection kit. Colorado Rain Catcher has it for $39.50. And then you need some way to get water out of the barrel. And so that can be a watering can, that can be a hose, could be a variety of things. And so I just put that amount in there. So the total cost you're looking at for one rain barrel is about $72 to about $90. The other materials that you will need are the Diverter Kit, like I mentioned. Now, after this class, you might go home and search on Amazon or wherever you search for your products and say, I found a kit that was cheaper than $39. So Jessica doesn't know what she's talking about. And if you find a kit, please let me know. I definitely want to know if there is one cheaper than I'm mentioning. But in a lot of cases, the kits that are cheaper don't have hole bits or spigots. Hole bits are what you need to drill into your rain barrel to be able to connect it up to your house. And then a spigot, again, is how the water comes out. So just beware, if you find a cheaper kit, it might not have everything that you need. You will also need a drill. I brought one with me to show you later. Gloves, eye protection, a level, tape measure, pencil, and a wrench. Materials for rain barrels. Plastic barrels work best for rain barrels. I have had people ask me, hey, I have these metal barrels sitting around. Can I use them for my rain barrel? The answer is yes. So here's what you need to do if you have a barrel that's metal and you just really want to use it. So what you need to do is go get plastic paint, paint the inside and outside of the barrel, let them all dry, and then you can use it. Otherwise, it will rust, obviously, from this picture. By the time you do all of that, it would have been cheaper probably to get a plastic barrel because the plastic paint is expensive. So you can use the metal barrels. It's just going to be more labor and cost intensive. There are a couple different types of barrels that you'll see with the tops. There are these screw tops that you'll see on the left, and then a fully opening top on the right. The lids that fully open are more expensive barrels because it's, more, it's easier to use those for cleaning, but they are more expensive. So the type that you typically see that's the most cost effective are the ones with the 2 screw caps. Both types are great, and I will give you a recipe later for how to clean them out and the way that you clean out the barrels with the 2 screw caps because the lid doesn't come fully off. Here is the diverter that I've been mentioning to you. An Earth-minded diverter had a kit that was similar to the one that I'm describing from Colorado Raincatcher. So when you're looking for them, that's another brand to look at. Pros are it has an easy install. You don't have to remove your downspout. It's cost effective, and the kit includes the hole saws and the spigot. The cons, it's important to talk about cons. The cons are you're unable to see the clogs. I'll show you why later. And then it also has the potential for clogging because there is a small interior opening in the center of the diverter so that large particles can go through like leaves or pine needles. But because it has this kind of smaller opening, it has the potential to clog. Okay, so now we're going to be talking about how to install your rain barrel unless there's a question that you would like to ask.
Yeah, if you have a couple minutes, I'll be
I do.
time, but yeah, we have some good questions coming in. All right. So utilizing, just really quickly, going back to that rain garden capture, is that included in the 110 gallons of water we can collect on properties? No,
it is not. Isn't that amazing?
Cool. All right.
You can have rain barrels and rain gardens.
Okay, perfect. That's a great clarification. Awesome. Let's see. And is there any talk about increasing the limit of rainwater that we can collect in the future? From your experience?
I haven't heard that yet, but what we need is all of you to kind of have those discussions and say, like, as we're seeing right now, I mean, Lake Mead, the levels are so low. We're having talks about reducing the water that we take from the Colorado River, which is our drinking water. We're going to have to start reducing the amount we're putting on our landscapes. Now is the time to be able to increase the water we're using of alternative sources like rainwater. So we need all of you to bring your voices to change that law. And I will be right there with you. You let me know when and where, and I'm there.
Awesome. Great. When you mentioned the 2 rain barrels, is that 2 rain barrels per property, building, or person?
Per property. You can also have a family unit. So up to a 4 building unit. It's still 2 barrels though.
Okay, good to know. I'll squeeze one more in here. This is a fairly big one, I guess, just so you can touch on it ever so lightly.
Yes.
Are there any ethical arguments against the rain collection being legalized since it's been legalized? And I guess that's kind of a huge,
amazing question.
Yeah.
So
a great question.
Yes. So what happened in the past, and the reason why rainwater harvesting was not legalized is because people looked at that as stealing water. So that the rain that fell on your house, my house, your house, already belonged to someone else. So they were really concerned that by allowing people to capture their rainwater, that they would be stealing, that there'd be less water for the downstream users who had a water right. Then there were studies done that showed that this was not the case, that it did not impact the amount of water in the river. Side note, in Arizona, Tucson, Arizona, there is an organization there called Watershed Management Group That's where I got my rainwater harvesting certification. And they have been working to increase the amount of rainwater harvesting done there for the last 20 years. And so what they have seen, so there's a lot of groundwater being used in Arizona because of the limitations of the amount of water on the Colorado River. And so they were having this river that went through Tucson. And I can't think of the name of the river off the top of my head, but it had perennial flows in the past. And then it stopped flowing altogether because of all of the groundwater use. So this organization started using rainwater harvesting as a means to get that river flowing again. And they've done it. So actually, what's happening is you are slowing down by capturing water in a rain barrel. You're slowing down the water to the river. The only way that you'd be stealing water is if you fill up your rain barrel, put it in a truck, and take it to another watershed, because it's still going onto your property and soaking into the ground and making its way into the groundwater. So you can think of it as just slowing down that water so that it's not all, when it rains, all the water, instead of going immediately to the river, it's actually being held back. So you're creating a mini reservoir.
Wow.
So that when you use the water later, it can still make its way to the river for when we need the water. And so it's really protecting our water resources.
Wow.
So I think it's ethically best to actually practice rainwater harvesting since it's benefiting the whole community.
Yeah, wow. I think we could have a whole webinar on that question alone. That is so interesting. Cool. Well, we'll keep on moving, and I think we're looking good on time. So
Okay, great.
questions coming. Thank you all.
Okay, so the first thing you need to do is choose your location for your rain barrel. So how to do this is you walk around your home and look at all of your downspout locations. These are all of your future possible rain barrel locations. And then you need to choose a location based on the proximity to where you need the water. So for example, if you have a garden in the back of your house, but you have this perfect spot for your rain barrel at the front of your house, probably need to rethink that rain barrel location, unless you're trying to get your steps. I have one of the step things too, but it's less likely that people will, keep doing those number of steps if it's a far distance from your rain barrel to your garden, and more likely if you put the rain barrel closer to your garden. So it's better to put it closest to where you will actually be using the water. The next thing to think of is how easy is it to make a level base in your area, in that area. So the rain barrel will sit on top of a base, and there's a lot of reasons why we're going to do that. I'll get into that in a moment. But I've seen some houses that, you have kind of a slope away from your house. It could be in between the fence and your house, and it's just difficult to make a base there, and it has to be level. So that's another something to keep in consideration. Next is the catchment area, or the amount of water that you can collect from that downspout or roof line. Now, an easy way to do this is take an overhead shot of your house. Not take one, look one up. How you can do that is Google your address and then click satellite view and then scroll in to your house. As you can see here, this was the top of my house before I did a lot of different landscaping. So when I looked at this, I had originally been thinking I would put my rain barrel in the number 1 spot because it was close to my garden. I thought it was perfect. But then I looked at this overhead shot and I saw that's a really small roof line. And then when I was looking, I noticed that in the number 2 area, there was this entire roof line here. I'm not sure if you can see my cursor, but there was this entire roof line that would drain to where the number 2 area is, which was still close to my garden, and it provided a much larger catchment area. So this is an easy way, once you know where your downspouts are, to look at your roof and see what roof lines might work best based on how much roof line there is and the catchment area. Next is don't forget other roofs. So I was, my loafing shed, which I didn't know what that was before we had this property, but it's like a storage area. You can see it in the top right picture or the right picture. And I really wanted a rain barrel on my loafing shed because it was uphill of my garden. So I was very excited. I called the gutter people and they were kind of put off because normally people aren't as excited as me when they're putting on gutters. But I was just like so excited. And one of the things that I find amazing about rainwater harvesting and rain barrels is that from the picture on the right, you can see this long arrow, this orange arrow. My rain barrel is just out of the picture on the right, but that's a pretty long span. And I hooked up my hose and I turned on my rain barrel and water came out right into my garden. It amazes me every single time. You have to make sure that you're using downward, the word is escaping me, not downward pressure. I can't think of what it is. But everything just has to be downhill from your rain barrel and then it will work. So it's like magic every single time. Okay, so next you need to create your base. Full barrels are very heavy. They can weigh over 500 pounds. So that is why your base has to be level and flat, and children must be supervised around rain barrels. So on the picture on the left there's an arrow pointing to a spigot on the ground. And it's a little bit difficult to see, but the spigot is so close to the ground that you would not be able to put a watering can under there or a hose. So one of the reasons why we elevate the rain barrels is so that you can access that water in them. The next reason is because rain barrels or rainwater does not have water pressure. So as you elevate water, you create water pressure. The water coming out of your house has water pressure. Rainwater, no water pressure. That is why you see those giant water towers that are really high up in the air, because it's creating water pressure. So you need to select a flat location within 3 feet of your downspout for your rain barrel. And the reason why you need to have it be within 3 feet is because that is the length of your tubing that you use to connect the downspout to your barrel. You can purchase a commercially available rain barrel stand, or you can make your own with wood, bricks, patio pavers, but my favorite is cinder blocks. They might not be the prettiest, but they do the job. I love how they are all the same size and that you need 6 to create a base for a 55-gallon rain barrel. And it just works great. I just think that they're the greatest. But if you would like to get something that looks fancier, then there are these other options. If you're using like the bricks or the extra patio pavers, my word of caution is just that they all be uniform. They need to be flat and uniform, because I have seen people create these bases that aren't stable. And if you buy a rain barrel stand, a lot of times I've seen the ones that look like a stool. They're on 3 legs. Don't use those, because if they have those on soil, they're very easy to tip. So they need to be something that has a very solid constructed base on the bottom. Okay, next you need to drill your spigot hole in your barrel. Yes, that's me. That was the first time I'd ever drilled a hole into a barrel, and I was nervous about it. I'm not what you would call handy, and so I hadn't used a lot of power tools before, but let me tell you, if I can do it, you can do it. And I'll tell you about all the mistakes that I made so that you don't have to make them. Sit on your barrel. It gives you greater control so it doesn't move around on you. Measure 3 inches up from the bottom of your barrel and make a mark. Carefully drill the spigot hole centered on the mark using the smallest hole saw. I'll be showing these all to you in show and tell after the presentation. And I do just want to say that this is using the Colorado Raincatcher kit. Also, the Earth-minded Diverter kit in the past has been very similar. But if you're using a different kit, be sure to follow those instructions and not the ones I'm giving you now. Okay, the smallest hole saw. Then you want to insert the smallest gasket. Again, I'll be showing you these later. I really like this gasket though, because it looks like a raindrop. So fun. Okay, this gasket is difficult to get in. So what you want to do is you want to drill the hole and then immediately put the gasket in. This is the gasket. You need to use soap. You put soap around the kind of the inside area right here, or the outside, I guess, the outside. Dish soap works great, and that will help you get this gasket into the barrel. People have asked me, should you, how does it matter how the raindrop is positioned? It doesn't matter at all. I just like it like this because it looks like a raindrop. Once you insert this gasket, then you will be inserting the spigot. This is the spigot by hand. You cannot insert the spigot into the gasket and then put it in your barrel. It will not work. You need to put the gasket in first and then your spigot. Next is you want to make sure the spigot is closed after you install it. I'm sure all of you are like, that's really obvious, Jessica. Why wouldn't I close my spigot? So I had installed my rain barrel on my loafing shed. It was supposed to rain. I was very excited about the rain and that my new gutters and everything. I took this picture because I wanted to be sure to show my classes the spigot and how if it's closed, it's a T, and if it's open, it's in line with this spigot. And so I took this picture and then I opened it for some reason. I went inside, it rained. I went back outside to measure the amount of water I collected, and I collected nothing because the spigot was open. So don't let this happen to you. I was very annoyed. So be sure that you close it. It looks like a T. So here it is closed. There it is open. Okay. Drilling a fill hole and connect the hose. So before, and this is where the water will come into the barrel. The water will fill the barrel through this fill hole. So you need to make sure of where the location of your barrel is before drilling the hole. The hole should be on the side of the barrel closest to the downspout. Because you only have 3 feet of tubing and it will not reach all the way around the other side of the barrel. So you need to have the hole on the same side as the downspout. Same thing, you make a mark 3 inches from the top of the barrel. Assemble the medium hole saw. There is a small and a medium. Carefully drill the fill hole centered on the mark and insert the next fitting. You see it doesn't look like a raindrop. This one is easier to get in, but if you have any issues, you can do soap around the outside of it, like I showed you before, to get it in there. And the reason that we want to do 3 inches from the top and 3 inches from the bottom is because that's maximizing the amount of water that you can collect by making sure that the spigot is at the lowest point and the fill hole is at the highest point possible. Okay, now we're installing our diverter. So you need to place your barrel on the stand with the spigot facing out. So you don't want to have the spigot facing in towards your house, then you can't access it. So make sure that your spigot is facing out, and then you measure your downspout. You have to measure it because you will always be drilling on the 3-inch side. Your downspout could be 2 by 3 or 3 by 4. Most residential houses are 2 by 3, but you could have a commercial downspout, which is 3 by 4. So use a level to mark the downspout at the height of the intake or the fill hole. The way that that is done is by, once you drill your intake or your fill hole, then you put on the tubing. So here it is where it's connected to your barrel, and then you wrap this around to where it will intersect with your downspout, and that is where you make a hole, or a mark rather, so that you can see that. And then you will measure it to make sure that it is level. This is really important. It has to be level because you want to make sure that once your rain barrel is full, that water will be able to exit your barrel through the downspout. and go on like normal through your downspout. If you put your diverter too high, your rain barrel will fill up with water, but then water will not be able to exit through your tubing that's connected to your rain barrel down your downspout because water does not go uphill. So what will happen is that the water will come out the top of your barrel. Yes, that happened to me. All the things that I'm telling you not to do, I already did, like I already said. So if you put it too high, your barrel will fill and water will come out the top, and then you have to fix it, and it's really frustrating. If you put your downspout, your diverter too low, water will not go uphill. Your barrel will never fill with water. So that is why it has to be level. Really important. Next, you use your largest hole saw, which is the biggest one. Drill into the 3-inch side of your downspout. Put on your eye protection and gloves. You are using or drilling with metal. Pressure is needed on your drill to be able to get that in there. A couple of notes about this. Most people have aluminum downspouts, but during one of my classes, I actually encountered someone that had a steel downspout. We found out that this drill bit will go through steel, but it takes longer. So you might find out through this process that you have a steel downspout. We don't know. Just so you know, these will work. Make sure you're holding the hole saw straight, because if you're moving it around, then it just makes the cut a little bit, harder to get that center piece out. Okay, make sure that you look at your downspout and that you can see the end of your downspout. Can you see where the water will be coming out of your downspout? Because I have seen some houses that have downspouts that go into the ground and then they come out somewhere else. If this is the case, you want to, there's these little self-tapping screws. You want to remove those, and then you can take out your downspout from where it goes into the ground before you drill this. Otherwise, what might happen is this little disc that you're cutting out of your downspout will go down and then clog up your downspout. And I don't want that to happen to you underground. So if that's the case, just make sure that you remove your downspout from the ground before you do your drilling. Next, you insert your diverter. So this is what it looks like. Your diverter looks like. You need to squeeze the side of the rubber diverter to insert it into the downspout. You just kind of wiggle it in. The cup and the arrow should be facing up. If it's difficult to insert, you can do the same thing by adding a little bit of soap on the outside. And then you just insert it like so. And then you need to use your 2 little screws. These are called self-tapping screws. I was going to show them to you, but I can't find them in there. Something important that you need to remember is that the diverter needs to be completely flush with no gaps and inserted all the way into the downspout. So you'll think that it's completely inserted, but there's a little lip on the downspout, or on the diverter, sorry. There's a little lip on the diverter, and it needs actually one more push before it's completely flush. Once it is, and I'll make a little popping noise. And so listen for that. Once it's completely inserted and flush, then you use the self-tapping screws. So apologies for all of you who are really handy and you already know what I'm about to say, but I was someone who needed this information, so I'm going to share it anyway. Self-tapping screws are different than regular screws that you would use for wood. When you're screwing in a screw into wood, it will stop eventually. When you can no longer, it's tight, you can no longer screw it in any longer. But with self-tapping screws in metal, specifically for this downspout, that's not the way that it works. So the way that you know that the self-tapping screw is done, that it can't go any farther, is that look at the metal. So the metal will have these ridges in it. That's what your downspout looks like. It looks kind of wavy. So when you put in the screw, it is ready. Like, you need to stop screwing it in once you see the metal come up to your diverter. So it just kind of like makes it flush. So that's the difference between self-tapping screws when you're using screws for something else. Now, if you have two barrels, you could install them in one location and use both barrels together, or do two barrels in different locations. So if you're going to connect them together for greater storage at this one location, then there are connector kits available from Colorado Raincatcher. You can also get these connector kits from Blue Barrel. Basically what you will need is an extra hose where the arrow is and an extra fill intake gasket. And then you need the same parts as what you need for your single barrel, the spigot, the connector tubing, the spigot gasket, and then the intake gasket. So when you're doing this installation of two barrels, something that you need to do is really important is that when you're connecting the middle tubing together, that's connecting the two barrels together, it has to be below the intake hole of the first barrel, because what you want to have happen is you want the water to fill up the first barrel, get to the hole connecting the two barrels, fill up the second barrel, and then fill up the other barrel, the first barrel, the rest of the way. Then the extra water will go down your downspout. So that's why the middle tubing needs to be lower than the intake hole on the first barrel. So when you connect the two barrels together, you install the first barrel, exactly how I had already told you. And then you need to insert your, your spigot gasket on the second barrel, and then your intake hole on your second barrel, and then make sure it's level and connect them together. After that, I highly recommend testing your system. You need to find a cute dog. Just kidding, but it's a cute dog picture. What I do is I take my hose and then I just water on the roof line above my barrel. So that is where the water will come into your barrel. If you have a barrel that you can remove the top, then you can see the water coming in. Otherwise, you can just hear it. You can get a flashlight and look in your barrel with like the two screw caps, or you can just listen for it. And that's making sure that everything was done correctly and that it's going into the barrel like it should. When you're winterizing your barrel, we don't want frozen barrels to happen to good people. So when you're winterizing your barrel, the first thing you want to do is empty your barrel. The reason why we have to winterize it is because if your barrel is full and it freezes, it will crack your barrel. So we don't want that to happen. Empty your barrel, remove the tubing connecting it to your downspout, rinse out any debris. This will make it easy for when you're about to install for the springtime to go ahead and hook up your barrel. You don't then have to rinse out any of the leftover debris from the previous year. Remove your diverter and put on the winterization cap. Check that the winterization cap doesn't have any leaking. The winterization cap, I'll show you this closer when we do our show and tell, but this is what the winterization cap looks like. You can leave the barrel in place or store it for the winter. It really depends on if you have a super windy area. The front of my house is really windy, and so I move my barrel for the winter time because otherwise it blows away. So if you don't have a windy area, then you could potentially leave your barrel in place or store it. For maintenance, if you have in other areas where we're able to collect a lot more water, like cisterns, you're collecting, 2,000 gallons of water. What you do in these locations, best practice is to have a first flush. And this is a PVC pipe that collects all of the water that comes off the house. That's usually the dirtiest water in this pipe. And then the cleaner water will go into your cistern. So that doesn't make sense to do that with a rain barrel, but you can mimic the same process by waiting to connect your barrel until after the first rain of the springtime. It's going to be really difficult because you're going to be so excited to connect your barrel that you just are going to have a hard time waiting. But if you just think about all of the things that have accumulated on our rooftops over the winter, And you don't want all of that going into your barrel. So just wait until after the first rain so that that can get washed off your roof, and then connect it for the second rainstorm. You want to be sure to clean out your gutters before connecting your barrel. Same reason. It's because you want to keep your barrel as clean as possible. You can have gutter covers if you would like. This would help to keep your rain barrel cleaner, but it's not a requirement at all. Rinse out your barrel before connecting it to prevent algae blooms, to help prevent algae blooms. So algae blooms develop when there are nutrients in a water that is not moving, and then it interacts with sunlight. So even if you don't have a barrel that has a screen on it, you could still potentially get algae blooms, and I'll talk about that next. Finally, use the water in your barrel. I know that seems obvious, but the more you use your barrel, the less likely you'll have issues of algae or the water getting kind of stagnant in your barrel. And when we install the barrel, we have 110 gallons to use, but it's not just 110. It's 110 and 110 and 110 as you get more and more rainstorms. But if you're not using the water, then you can't capture as much as you could if it was empty by the next rainstorm. Here are some frequently asked questions that I get. One, will collecting water off of an asphalt roof leach pollutants? And connected to that is it safe to use rainwater on a garden? So these are links. Again, the blue lettering is links. So the short answer is yes, it is safe to use rainwater on a garden, and yes, water from an asphalt roof will leach pollutants. How can those both be true? So there was a study done, forgive me, I cannot remember who did the study, of the water coming off of asphalt roofs. Actually, they did a study on a number of different roof types, and they wanted to see what would happen to the vegetables that were grown with rainwater. So they hyperpolluted these different types of roofs more than we would have on our own roofs because they wanted to see what would happen. Then rain fell on them. They collected the water, they tested the water, found that there were in fact pollutants in the water. And then they put it on plants, and then they tested the plants afterwards. And the beautiful thing about soil is that it filters out the pollutants. And so the vegetables in the gardens did not have pollutants in them from the roofs that they tested. So what I always say is that it is very safe to use rainwater on your garden, with the caveat, do not use them on your leafy greens. I say that because you're directly eating your leafy greens and it touches the water. So I prefer to use drinking water on leafy greens to help prevent any sort of contaminant being directly ingested by anyone. So you can use your rainwater on your tomatoes. I always water the base of my plants, which is best practice anyway. You can still use them when you're doing potatoes or carrots because the soil will still filter out the contaminants even with root vegetables. So there are a lot of ways that you can use rainwater. Will algae grow in my barrel? Maybe. The best practices that I mentioned of doing the first flush, cleaning out your gutters, making sure that you don't have a screen top, painting your barrel if it is white to help prevent the sunlight coming in. Those are all things that will help prevent algae from growing, but it still might grow in there. And if that happens, it's not a big deal. You can still use the water, and then you can clean out your barrel with the recipe that I will be showing you next, and then hook your barrel back up. So it's not a big deal if algae does grow in your barrel. How do I keep leaves and particles out of my barrel? And the same thing that we kind of already just mentioned, but attaching it with a diverter will help keep those out. it has a opening to allow the larger particles to come out. You still get debris and whatnot in your barrel, but you get less than if it was directly connected, like the barrel I showed you initially, where the downspout went just right into your barrel. The last question I get a lot is, can mosquitoes still get in my barrel? Maybe. I learned a lot more about mosquitoes than I wanted to know, and I will share that with you. So mosquitoes can breed in a very small amount of water. So the amount of water that when it rains and then it gets into your gutter, there's a little bit of leftover water in your gutter until it is evaporated. And that little tiny bit of water, mosquitoes can lay eggs. That tiny amount of space, the next time it rains, that water could get washed into your barrel. So it is possible, but it is less likely because you have a closed system. But if they do get into your barrel, something that you can use is a mosquito dunk. Here it is linked here for you. It's harmless to pollinators and wildlife and safe on plants. And it looks like a donut, a flat donut, and you just put it inside your barrel and it takes care of your mosquito problem. They use them a lot with horse trough feeders, so they're safe. Next, here is the little recipe for your cleaning your barrel. You want to disconnect your barrel from the house, rinse out the barrel with the hose. Use a long-handed scrubber if you have one. I just kind of made one. And then add in these cleaning products, then rinse out the barrel with the hose. So if you have the type of barrel with the twist off caps, the 2 twist off caps, what you do is you put do the same steps, add in the cleaning products, and then turn the barrel on its side and swish it. Swish vigorously. And so what I do is I kind of turn the barrel on the side, roll it a little bit, swish it, roll it a little bit, swish it. And I promise I sound like a crazy person, but it works. And if it's especially dirty, you might have to do it a couple of times. But here is the formula or the ingredients for you to clean out your barrel. Decorating your barrel. Some people don't like the blue color of barrels, and maybe you'll have a requirement that you have to paint your barrel. So here is how you decorate your barrel. Decorate before you install or remove your barrel from your house before decorating. This paint does not come off. I also know that the hard way. So the first thing you need to do is to use sandpaper, 100 weight, to around the whole surface of your barrel. You need to sand it very lightly, and that is to get the paint to stick to your barrel. Then wipe it down, allow it to dry, and then get a plastic paint primer. Your paint will not stick without it. The kind that I like to use is Rust-Oleum primer. It has, for plastic, there's different kinds of Rust-Oleum. You're going to go to the store. There's way more choices than anyone should have. But the plastic one, last time I checked, had a white and a gray. It doesn't matter which one you use. And you will need 1.5 cans to cover a 55-gallon barrel. So if you have 2 barrels, you need 3 cans, and it works out great. When you decorate your barrel, you can create your own design. There's also stencils that you could get. You could make, or decals that you could put on your barrel. If you get a white barrel, you have to paint it. If you get a blue barrel, like you've seen throughout this presentation, you don't have to paint it. And that is just the amount of light that's being blocked by each of those. If you have a white barrel, then algae will form because sunlight can go through that white barrel. The cool thing, if you get a white barrel, is that when you're painting it, as pictured here, you put a piece of painter's tape along one of the edges, and then you can see the amount of water that you have in your barrel because you have this strip that will show you exactly how much water is in your barrel. So that's a really neat trick that you could do if you happen to get a white barrel. For artistic barrels like this one, this beautifully painted barrel, you will need to protect your work afterwards by spraying a paint sealer. Here are some photos from Pinterest I love Pinterest, and I'm not necessarily artistic. This picture up here with the handprints is more my speed, but for all of you artistic folks out there, there are a lot of really neat, beautiful ways you could decorate your barrel. I really liked the picture on the left because they use the blue of the color barrel to add that into their art piece. So how you would do this is you would get your stencil and then you would spray the paint primer to just be to the areas that you were going to paint. So you don't have to paint with the primer your entire barrel. If you're going for this look, you can just use your stencils to use the primer on that and then just paint those. I really liked this barrel down here with the fish, and it had the connected piece together. So I need to find whoever made that barrel to come decorate at my house too. Another question that I get is, well, how much impact are we really having with a rain barrel? How much water are we actually saving? So I wanted to tell you how in 2020, I counted how many times my rain barrel was filled, had some extra time on my hands in 2020, and I found that I filled my rain barrel 11 times. So I saved 605 gallons of water that year by using that much rainwater. Some folks will say that adding a rain barrel to your house won't matter that much for water conservation. And if it was just one person, maybe not. But if we all do our part, if we all conserve water, it's a huge impact. Together, we can save thousands of gallons, hundreds of thousands of gallons of water, build sustainable communities, and ensure that we have water for future generations by doing simple water conservation. I added some resources here for you. There is a quick rain barrel installation video in case you need a reminder. When I say quick, it's 45 seconds, I think. I can't install a rain barrel in 45 seconds. I think they sped up the time a little bit, but it is a great reminder on kind of what you need to do. Here is the book that I mentioned, Rainwater Harvesting for the Drylands and Beyond. I did hear that they are either have produced, or are in the process of producing this book in Spanish. So be on the lookout for that. The links for the Colorado Stormwater Center, Colorado Raincatcher, Blue Barrel, Resource Central, and sorry, the city of Greeley got snuck in there, which they are fantastic. So if you are in the city of Greeley, be sure to check that out, but be sure to check with your water provider that you have locally. Okay, I'm going to pause. I'm going to stop sharing my screen while the questions are being read to me, and then I'll do show and tell afterwards.
Awesome. And just a reminder to everybody that all the slides will be available afterward with all of the links in there. And I will also put the turf removal email address in the chat if there was anything that is not covered through the questions. Well, that was awesome, Jessica. I feel like all of your trial and error are exactly things that I would have done. So I really appreciate how much time you covered all of that. All right, we have some great questions. So just right off the bat, how long did your installation take you the first time?
Well, the first time I did it differently, but I would say that you could install your rain barrel in an hour and a half. What takes the longest usually is preparing your base. So especially if you are doing it on an area with soil, and then making sure if you have different components that you're using for your rain barrel, like not the cinder blocks, then it takes longer to make sure they're all level. So you could reduce the time that you are doing your installation by making sure that the pieces that you're using for your base are uniform, and that it's on a solid surface. I put one of my rain barrels on concrete, and so it was really easy to do that way. And then the other one was on soil, and so it took longer. But all in all, the whole process, maybe an hour and a half.
Wow, awesome. Have you done much with rain barrels with drip irrigation?
I love that I get this question so much. I just love it. So I haven't yet. but Blue Barrel has the adapter parts for the drip irrigation. The thing to just remember with drip irrigation, and if you're trying to think about this like your current irrigation system, is that your current irrigation system, when it's hooked up to your house water, will always run. But if you hook it up to your rain barrel, there might not be enough water in there. So it's just something to keep in mind. I love the idea of using it. My recommendation would be, if you're going to do a drip system, to have 2 barrels.
Okay.
And there's a couple of different ways that you could install your rain barrel. Contact me about this one, because there's different ways to install your rain barrel to make sure that their levels go down together. The one that I showed you is you use each individually. So there's different ways that you could do the installation to make sure that with your drip irrigation system, it would work more efficiently. Additionally, you can't time it like you would do right now with your irrigation system. So what that means is that there are timers that you can buy that you could just set. It's kind of like a one of those clock timers, those kitchen timers, like the egg timers. It's kind of like that. So you have to go out and set it each time. You can't just say like Tuesday, I want this to run at 8 a.m. for an hour, just because you have to go check and make sure there's water in there. But you can get some of these systems where you just set it for an hour and you go out Tuesday morning and you do it. The other thing is there's different types of emitters. And so the kind that you should get, don't use soaker hoses. Oh, don't do that, because in general, but for rain barrels as well, because the plants at the front of them will get a lot more water than the plants at the end. And so it's really hard to keep that pressure. So there's different types of drip systems that are meant to go with rain barrels, and they have holes, intermittent holes at certain areas, and then that it's guaranteed how much water will go out of there. So Blue barrels is the best place to look for those additional parts.
Okay. So great point about the soaker hoses. Would not have thought about that. So in terms of when to winterize, is it okay to, we have a lot of sunny days and then cold days. Is it okay to wait, after the first freeze, or when is like the best time to go ahead and winterize?
You can wait because, like you said, sometimes we get our first freeze in like September, and the next time it's in November. So it is really hard to tell, but if it's going to be a very hard freeze, then you just kind of need to make a judgment call on that and see what the weather will be like afterwards, and look at how full your rain barrel is. If it's full all the way to the top, then I would recommend that you let out some of that water before the freeze so that you don't crack your barrel.
Okay. And we just got a question, if you could repeat the company that has the parts to connect drip irrigation.
Yes, Blue Barrel Systems.
Okay.
And it's in the notes section, or the additional resources as well.
Okay.
So you'll have that link.
Awesome.
And I just found out randomly that the person who started the Blue Barrel Systems is a CSU grad.
Oh, no
Go
way.
Rams. Yeah.
Rams, very cool. So you said Blue Barrel. I'll go ahead and put that in the chat. Awesome. Do barrels work well with roofs that have solar panels?
I don't see why not. Are your gutters different because of your solar panels?
I would assume not. I have solar panels and our gutters are the same. So as long as I guess it's going off the panel into the gutter, then you should be all set.
You should be fine. Yeah, actually you're getting kind of
double.
Yeah, you're getting double the surface area. So yay for solar panels.
Yeah, that's awesome. Cool. And then I guess the last question here, we did have a question about your chicken coop, but maybe I'll have them email you directly about that one.
Okay, for sure.
But last question here is a more general question. What is the reason for limiting the amount of water that you can collect in your yards? I guess the historical context behind that.
Yeah, when rainwater harvesting was legalized in 2016, a lot of people were still really nervous about it. So they wanted to make sure that there wasn't going to be harm to a water right once this was approved. And so they kind of wanted to do this as a trial to make sure that they wouldn't see reduced flows in the river because of it. So that was the reasoning behind it. At the same time, I haven't heard any plans to increase the limit, even after there's been no demonstration of any harm to any water right. So anyway, that was the original context behind it.
Interesting. All right, well, that is all of our questions. I'll let you go into show and tell, and I'll go ahead and put our email address in the chat as well as the blue barrel.
Okay, so here are the different parts. So here is I have to move it around a little bit. Here is the spigot that goes with the, here's the gasket that goes with the spigot. This is the smallest, and so it needs to go with the smallest hole saw. You can line them up to see that they're the same size. The middle hole saw, if you use the middle hole saw, this will not fit in your barrel and it will leak and everybody will be sad. Okay, so be sure they're using the correct hole saw with the correct gasket. Okay, here is the spigot. I always like to show the spigot. I didn't bring my flashlight with me, which is usually very helpful, but on your house, you probably have a spigot that has it looks like a wheel on it, and it has a very tiny hole in that wheel. And you turn it on and water comes out and it's all great because it's pressurized. You don't want to use that same type of system with your rain barrel, because you can kind of see on my other side. There we go. You kind of see my hand. Yay. So you don't want to use that same system or the same spigot for your rain barrel, because it will take forever, and I mean forever, to fill up your watering can, and you will be annoyed. You'll be like, Jessica told me it wasn't going to take forever, and it's taking forever. So use this type. It's called a full port hose bib, and it has a completely full opening in it. And if it's open, it's in line. Closed, it looks like a T. Okay. Next is the diverter. So here is the diverter. You squeeze it this is the way it's up. Okay. Sometimes in some instances, you'll see directions that say you can leave your diverter in place for the winter. Don't do that. Don't do it, because, and they say just turn it over. I think it looks like Darth Vader. Okay. Isn't it? Okay. I gave a talk one time on May 4th, which is Star Wars Day, and I cracked myself up for a long time about how this looked like Darth Vader. Anyway, so what they say is to turn it over and that you can just leave it in. But I don't recommend that, because this hole, I think, will catch ice and then it'll plug up your whole system and cause overflow of your gutter system. So don't do that. Just remove it and put on your winterization cap. Use the same 2 screws that you do for your diverter. You can see the holes right there too. Okay. All right. And I'm sure you're all wondering, okay, Jessica, I heard you say is drill it into the 3-inch side. Okay, so this is what it should look like. The 3-inch side should be the front of your downspout if you have a 2x3. And I'm sure you're wondering, what does it look like inside? I'm glad you asked. It looks like this. See how it's going all the way to the edges there? Okay. And now you're wondering, oh my gosh, what happens if I completely mess it up? Great question. So if you put it on the side, you can see that it looks kind of wrong already, because it doesn't look like it quite fits. It's not the end of the world. It will still work, but there is a gap right here. And so you're not going to be maximizing the amount of water that you could collect if you had installed it correctly. And it looks kind of squished, right? So, don't panic. You don't have to rip off all the downspout from your house. It will still work, but that's what it will look like if you do that. So when you're taking out your diverter, what I have found the best way to remove them is to turn them over, okay? And then you can kind of wiggle them out, because they have this little gap on there. And now, of course, when you do it live, you can't do it, but I promise they come out. But they have this little like hook kind of a thing on there, and it just makes it, let me see if I can get it good. You kind of see, okay, it looks kind of like a little ear. There we go. As a little hook, and it just kind of hangs on. And so it's easier to remove it if you turn it over and then kind of wiggle it out. Okay, next is the hole saws. So they all come with this bit, and then you use the same bit with all the different hole saws, which is pretty cool. And so you unscrew it, you put on the whole bit of the size that you need, and then you screw it back on. So the thing I wanted to show you, again, I'm not a handy person. So the thing I wanted to show you for all of you folks who are also not handy, it's okay. You know what? We're okay. Okay, for all of you who are handy, again, rolling your eyes at me. I can't see you, so I can't tell if you're rolling your eyes or not. Here is a drill. The drill can go clockwise or counterclockwise. I know this is obvious. Here's the hole saw. Okay, here's the hole saw. It has these little teeth. Okay, this is meant to go clockwise. So when you put in your hole saw into your drill and you accidentally do it counterclockwise, like I did, it will unscrew your hole bit and it will fall in your rain barrel. And it's really hard to get out. So I don't want that to happen to you. So be sure that you are going clockwise or forward when you're drilling with your drill, either into your barrel or into your downspout. It's especially important with your downspout because these are supposed to go a certain way and they cut best going clockwise. So since I made that mistake multiple times, I just wanted to be sure to let you all know that tidbit of information. Next, so here is the hose that comes with it. I kept talking about the 3 feet. So here's the 3 feet. Here's something I also learned. It is best to keep the hose as close to your barrel, between your downspout and your barrel as possible. Otherwise, this happens. Okay. Water will not go uphill. I did an installation where I was using the maximum length of this, and it was flat. I'm telling you, it was level. I was very excited. As soon as it rained, it did this, and I was very upset. So if you need to use the full length of this, the full 3 feet, I recommend that you use something to either prop it up or use a more stable material like PVC pipe, because it will bend and then you won't get the water that you're trying to get in there. That is all. That is all for my show and tell. Here is.
Well, thank you so much. This was incredibly informative. So just a reminder to everybody, the slides will be available as well as I believe the contact information. And of course, email us at any time at turfremoval@resourcecentral.org. We'd love to hear from you all if you can leave a review on Google Reviews, and then a survey will be sent afterward as well. And it enters you in for a $250 Visa gift card. So definitely let us know what you think. Is there anything else, Jessica?
No, I just want to say thank you for the invitation to be a part of this series. Thank you to the Community Language Co-op for being with us today and translating. And thank you to Resource Central for inviting me and being a part today.
We cannot thank you enough. This was awesome. And thank you all so much for joining us. This was a great evening.
Thank you.